Welcome, welcome. My name is Aoife. I am a mind body coach. So I help or teach sensitive women how to heal themselves from chronic pain, chronic illness, anxiety, and depression. So you can get your life back and get back to your power and purpose using these mind body tools. And I am not a doctor. But so the tools that I teach are from my direct experience of overcoming 30 years of diagnosis, incurable diagnosis, and pain, fibromyalgia, IBS, many different symptoms that I searched the globe to find a way to break free from. I finally did. Now I help others. And today I'm very excited. We have Andrew here, and he is here to share his story of recovery because there's just so much wisdom that you can share with us today, Andrew, and I'm sure we will have so much in common because usually you do when you've been on this recovery journey. And it is, yeah, it's healing your brain. Your brain rewires when you just hear new information or gain a fresh insight. So I'm really grateful for you being here today, Andrew, and sharing your energy with us.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for welcoming me. It's really nice to chat with you. And you're right. I think you get some reassurance too. That rewiring, even before that, you get reassurance if you're on the right path. And people like you that put these messages out there. I know you and other coaches. You spend so much of your own time getting this message out there, and there are people that benefit that you may never even hear from because they're like following the breadcrumbs. They're hearing, listening to a podcast, they're hearing Aoife's story, they're putting things together, and they pick up some momentum. And I don't know. When I was thinking about talking to you today, I wanted to kind of start off by acknowledging that you may not know how many people you've probably affected over the years, and you should be proud of that because not only are you working with people directly as a coach, but your message is out there. People listen to it, and it might just be that they're kind of bouncing around. They've been suffering and they're bouncing around. They're fed up with bad diagnoses. They're fed up with doomsday stories, and something connected them to um, another way to look at it. And so yeah, I'm happy to share my story with you. That'll be fun.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for your kind words. It's really, yeah, it's always just so nice to reflect on that. And yeah, just when you were even mentioning the doomsday and the bad diagnosis and everything, I just really remember living in that world of bouncing around from doctors' offices and scans, and I had my whole entire body scanned throughout my life and tubes and all different diagnosis. I was diagnosed as mystery girl. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my story, I mean, I'm really fortunate that my story was short with what I dealt with. But there's so many, like life is a bunch of forks in the road, right? I think of the Muppets. Was it Kermit and Fonzie are driving? Fork in the road. That's the big fork. Sorry. uh, it forks in the road where you're getting pieces of information and pieces of advice. And I lucked out that I had a bunch of correct turns, that I got steered. But any one of those, I could have gone another path and still be stuck in pain. So, so yeah. So my story, I typically tell it right about when the big stuff happened, but not. I think for you, I'll start even earlier. There were a bunch of years after we moved. We our family moved twice. We moved from Connecticut, New England, U.S., out to Australia for a few years, and then we moved here to Atlanta, Georgia. And a few years after moving here, I got stuck in this pattern of achy joints, stiff and popping joints, achy muscles. Um, and I attributed it to a mold exposure from when I was renovating an old house. And sure, I went through some treatment for that, but some of these symptoms stuck around, and I chased them through like the naturopathic doctors and food restrictions and food sensitivities, inflammation. and had some success, but then big setbacks a few times. And I'd also get like I'd have spell maybe a day or two every month or so that I'd have like frequent and urgent urination. Like I'd have to go, and it would be like I got to go now, like pulling over on the side of the road, just off, and really disruptive. Um, so that was kind of in the background, and there was a lot of stress and anxiety about my career, about I had house repairs, my father was sick, but I wasn't connecting those at all. There was no connection. I was just like, yeah, stress can, you kind of assume people are comfortable with like stress affecting your sleep, right? Everybody knows that. Nobody's really arguing that. People will agree with you if you say, well, stress can give you a headache. They don't really think about the mechanism, but that's accepted. They may be comfortable with saying that like stress can give you digestive issues, stomach aches. They don't really think of the mechanism, but those are things that like if you put the mind body ailments, those are like the ones that everybody accepts, I would say. you know then you start to drift into like neck tension. You got some people that are comfortable with that idea. Then you go to like back pain, and then you go to like pelvic pain, which I dealt with. You get a little bit of acceptance, but then there's some things that people don't attribute to stress at all. Anyways, I dealt with those symptoms, and then I had a massive flare up of that frequent and urgent urination. Like, had to go every 15 minutes overnight. Went to the doctor the next morning, got a test to see if I had a bladder infection, a urinary tract infection. I didn't. Had that happen again a few times in a short span, and was dealing with some pain kind of in the like groin, pelvic, lower abdomen area. And had a week off from work, just timing wise. It was just something that was on my schedule, and felt like I got a little bit better. And then when I went back to work, the pain went right through the roof, and I couldn't work. And I was somebody that had not taken a sick day. Sometimes I would go a whole year without taking a sick day. And now I couldn't work. I was in extreme pain. That first week I worked a few hours every day. And then I realized by the end of the week that something was really wrong. So I started down kind of the pelvic pain route, went to urologist and got the prostate checks, and eventually found my way to a pelvic floor therapist. And that's where some of those, I lucked out with some of those interactions. The woman urologist I met with, she talked about stress being a factor. The physical therapist very much was stress related. Now they're talking about like tight pelvic floor muscles causing the pain. But I was getting some like aiming in the right direction. Now at the same time, it's very physical pain. I mean, physical output, constipation, urinating all the time, complete sexual dysfunction, pain radiating down my legs. At times, I went into such pain shock that I was bundling up in blankets because I was shivering in pain. So, some crazy stuff. I ended up taking 6 weeks off from work because I couldn't do anything. And, you're just going down that doomsday, like, oh my God, I'm taking time off from work. Am I going to lose my job? All these things. And just spiraling. I was on some meds, some painkillers, and I did a series of injections into my pelvic floor where they're putting the needle in the worst place possible. You don't have to imagine that. And I got to the end of the 6 weeks, and I was able to return to work. I was still dealing with some symptoms. Physical therapist, the pelvic physical therapist was great. And then I had a few months where I kind of was doing okay, but the symptoms were there. It was definitely disruptive. And then I dealt with a handful of personal things quickly. My father, his health got much worse, and he ended up passing away. And I had an old friend from my home state pass away that I didn't know about and found out about afterwards. had a good friend and his wife back in Australia come down, get diagnosed with cancer on the same day, both of them, husband and wife. And my symptoms came back all the way. And so then the connection to stress was just obvious. Where I might have been like 50-50 before that, where there was the tight pelvic floor muscles and all of that. Now the stress was definitely my leading issue. But at the same time, one of the things that I was diagnosed with was pudendal neuralgia, which your pudendal nerve is right down by your groin, and it can be attributed to being a cyclist. And I had been riding my bicycles for 25 years, racing, training, riding for fun. And so I was also having, even though I had the stress piece, I was also running into well, maybe it's from bicycling for so long. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me because, like, why would it not hit me until now? Like, there were times in my life I was riding a lot more. So, yeah, maybe I'll take a pause there to see if you have any questions because I'm on my second cup of coffee for the morning. I can keep rambling.
No, just thank you so much for sharing your story so openly and so authentically. I also had what I called bladder syndrome. So I had from a young child all different kinds of symptoms and diagnosis that just like built up. It just continued to build up over the years. But it was when it was in 2017 for me that a friend of mine died, also just a similar experience. And she died in a very traumatic way. And I was in a stressful, intimate relationship at the time. So there was a huge amount of stress going on in my body on top of the lifetime buildup. And I did get a very severe kidney infection. But so the infection went away. I took the antibiotics, but the symptoms stayed of this like burning and this pain and this constant urination. I was awake. So on top of everything I already had, now I was awake all night going to the toilet and yeah, all kinds of things were happening then throughout the day that were uncomfortable and horrible and embarrassing, and I couldn't leave the house on top of already being barely being able to because of my symptoms. So, and another thing I liked what you shared was the acceptance, like that there's stress and then there's a symptom, but it's the mechanism. It's really, and for me, that was actually, I said once it was like understanding the biology of stress. But for me, that was a portal, let's say,
But
to my healing
yeah,
was really just understanding the mechanisms. And that's just my mind. It's just, I love biology. I love
sure.
science. I love that information. So for someone else, that might not be so important. But
Yeah.
for me, that was what unlocked this healing for me, is just really understanding how stress happening in your life and your own internal responses to it can manifest as these different symptoms.
Yeah, well, I'm an engineer, so like when I first came down with this pelvic pain, like what did I want to do? I wanted to learn all the anatomy, and hyper focus on it. And what does this symptom mean? Where does this nerve innervate? Like all the things. And that's for an acute injury that makes sense. And if I could put my finger on an acute injury, like if I had one thing happen that had caused this, then I could be like, yeah, I sprained this, but it wasn't. It was just this buildup leading years of initial symptoms and then flare up that was undeniable. So to pick up my story again, when I had, that second massive flare up, I had, that first flare up, I had taken 6 weeks off from work. That second flare up, I ended up taking the rest of December off after my father passed away. And I did some of the physical treatments again. I went back to the PT a few times because the pain was insane. So it made sense, to feel like I got to do anything I can. But at the same time, I was bumping into some evidence that that not only was it stress, but that there was a way out that wasn't simply like, somebody could say, well, just lower your stress, right? But for certain personalities, it's not that easy. Um, and I'm one of those personalities. So I I bumped into a post on Instagram from a pelvic physical therapist that only worked remotely with patients, and she practiced mind body techniques, and some of it was starting to resonate with me, and she had a post that was really like the exploding head, like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. So I interacted with her as my coach for a few months, and she got me out of the worst of it. She helped get me off of the med. I mean, she didn't go in and be like, you're going to stop the meds, you're going to stop physical therapy. She said, like, she asked me what my goals were, and we worked on that. But she really was the first person to really show me how the nervous system worked and why chronic stress can lead to chronic pain. And then she taught me how to mellow out my nervous system through breathing techniques and meditation, and how much your thoughts control your body. And so she worked wonders. And then I had that was about 2 years ago now. And then I had a few months go by where I kind of plateaued, where life was mostly normal, like I was working normal. I was exercising, personal life was good, with my wife, and sexual function was back. And, I wasn't running to the bathroom every 15 minutes. But I had some challenges still. I wasn't back on my bicycle. The fear of the pudendal neuralgia had kept me off my bike for a year and a half. I was facing a pretty big career decision that was stress that I knew could generate new stress. And then the last one was I still had fear of the pain coming back, like that it almost felt imminent, like it's going to happen. And so, I'm shortening my long story, but I started working with Jeannie Colwyn at that point. And Jeannie, her style, she was great. She wanted to be very goal and passion focused and purpose. And so I worked with her for a bunch of months, and all those things happened. I got back on my bicycle. I did the big career change, job change, and I eliminated my fear of the symptoms. And really the fear of the symptoms came from that, like I would have this little lingering symptom all the time. And she taught me somatic tracking and how to lower the fear of it and get your body to not be so hypersensitive. So when I finished up with Jeannie, she encouraged me because she thought my story was cool. Not enough, maybe not enough men out there speaking out. And she connected me to Eddie Lindenstein to do his mind and fitness podcast. And I had already been messaging with Eddie about coaching kids soccer because I coached for 12 years and he was coaching his daughter's team, and we had some fun. So he put me on his podcast this past February. And I decided after that I would put my story out there. So I created an Instagram page, and I just have my story kind of out there so people can connect with me if they have questions and they want to know a little bit more, get some certainty. I'm not a coach. I end up aiming people at coaching because I tell people that they'll get a lot out of it and that they're spending so much time and money on their own that they should work with a coach. They'll get better results. And then I had been on two other podcasts. I did the Beyond the Pelvis podcast with Dr. Keneal and Laura. They're the two hosts of that. And then I did a podcast with Anna Holtzman. So that was awesome.
All
And then I have,
the gang.
what's that?
All the gang.
All the gang. Yeah, I kind of did. And then I also have my story on a website that a really generous woman started called pnandcycling.com. And it's pudendal neuralgia and cycling, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about pudendal neuralgia and cycling and the difference between acute pain and chronic pain in mind and body. There's no doubt that if you aren't a cyclist, that's not your hobby, and you jump on a bike and you ride for 8 hours on your first ride, you could develop pelvic pain, but that doesn't mean it should become chronic. And so that's there's a lot of misinformation out there, so I have my story there. So a lot of the people that connect with me are cyclists and want to know about pelvic pain and what I did. That tends to be the folks that find me.
So I love what you're sharing. And one of the things that really stuck out to me that I had similar is this hyper focus on the anatomy. And the way you described like these different forks in the road, I think a lot of people get these different scary diagnoses either from a doctor or from an alternative practitioner as well. And for me, that really led me down a path of more fear and more focus and more describing of the pain. And I used to get really involved in potential viruses and potential funguses and where all the digestive enzymes and the ones that were working and the ones that weren't working. And it just for me, it was
Yeah.
I was losing my mind. Like I was
Oh,
losing my mind. Obviously, why wouldn't you? You're being gaslit your whole life. You have these very, very real uh symptoms that are debilitating and you're trying desperately to get through life. And then this fear is building up. Am I going to have to leave my job? All these different very real fears, and you're being gaslit all the time. So it's that's normal reaction. I always say to people, it's a normal reaction to literally be losing your mind and to hyper focus on
yeah.
things. So for me, that was huge. And then luckily for me, all my scans came back normal. Every single
Yeah.
part of my body has been scanned. But for people who get either I got theories. So the theories were problematic for me because people were always giving me different theories about mold and bacteria and viruses and stuff. But for some people, they get theories about injuries as well, about past injuries, and then that hyper focus. Oh, people tell me, and I mean, this isn't even potential clients or anything. These are just like these are family members. Sometimes they're like, no, it's this. They know the tendon, and they know the air, and they know they suddenly know all this information
Yeah.
about the skeletal system and the anatomy and the nerves and where it goes and where it comes from, where it lands, and why the pain is there. And that's when the focus
Yep.
can really go in. And that's a fork. That's like you're
Yeah.
gone that way when
Yep.
you needed to go that way.
Yeah. Well, and you're hoping for that easy answer, right? Like you're hoping that, like for what you were dealing with, to be like, oh, well, just take this supplement, right? Or do whatever. Or for me, initially it was like, well, I'll just do the stretching and the physical therapy for a week or two, and I'll be fine. And those would uh, lower the symptoms a bit, but stuff would be right there coming back until I really addressed it. And that's really what I was dealing with for so long and just didn't know it. And I talk about like what I dealt with being about a year and a half long, but that's really from the start of that big flare up. I had probably 2 years before that where I had crappy quality of life because of those early symptoms that weren't so bad, but they still were disruptive. They still affected my relationships with my sons and my wife and my work. It was still on my mind a lot, and I spent stupid amount of money with naturopaths and chiropractors and buying supplements. I mean, if I could have that money back, well, I'd have another new bicycle probably. But um, so yeah, so to like kind of bring you right to here, since February, I've had my story out there. I've had the podcast that I did. I have the Instagram site, and people reach out to me. They find me from different ways and ask me some questions. And sometimes it's time consuming and but yet rewarding. And other weeks I'll be like, yeah, I can kind of put it on hold. Nobody's asking me anything, and I'm an engineer. I have a full time job, so I'm not trying to be a coach. But the stuff fascinates me. It really does. And I still eat up the new information and the podcast. And I love hearing, different people expand upon how all this works. And I do believe it's going to be revolutionary. It may come slowly, but I think it could really change the way that people look at health.
100%.
And
I believe it too.
and just all of our initial reactions when we don't feel quite right. Like when we wake up in the morning and we're exhausted, or we have a headache, or we have a sore back, the initial immediate reaction of that physical cause and needing a physical remedy. Now, sometimes you can connect the two. I have a sore back because I did a lot of yard work yesterday. Okay, you strained some muscles. But other times your body is just on high alert and looking for danger to protect you. And you are mistaking that for something that has to be fixed in a physical way, when really you have to address what's causing your body to be in such stress. Like, why are you on high alert? Why is your nervous system on edge? Is it something you're dealing with in your personal life or your professional life? Is it stuff from your past that you're dwelling on? And how are these things kind of building up and then putting you on high alert? Um, and then because the other option is you start searching for this physical issue and you are reinforcing to your brain to keep looking, right? Go get another scan, go see another specialist. Well, this doctor didn't give me anything new, so I'm going to go to this one. He's going to change my meds. And then, and I interact with people that message me, and they've been dealing with that for years, and it's so tough to hear.
It's really, really tough to hear. And it's really, really tough when you're going through it and you're bouncing around from doctor to doctor and you just desperately want an answer. And I do remember seeing a doctor. I had a scope done on my stomach. And I remember him suggesting, like, I'm gonna say he didn't have a good bedside manner. Let's just put it that way, right? So that didn't help
Yeah,
in whatever he was suggesting to me. And he did try to suggest that maybe there was something in my life that was causing stress. But it was very hard for me to like, let's just say, accept that information or be curious about that information because I had at that point already spent 10 years doing therapy, meditation, breath work even. And so I had already been on a very long journey of understanding my, let's say, emotional or psychological world. But so but there was still something missing for me. And it really is for me this mechanism, like you said, of just understanding that connection. And also, so on the one side is understanding the mechanism between my body and my mind.
yeah,
But on the other hand, it was really understanding what was generating all this chronic stress. So even though I understood my emotional world very well and I understood my past very well, it was all very intellectual still. Even though I was
yeah,
meditating, it was still all very intellectual. It was actually it brought me, boom, it actually just brought me into a whole layer when I found the mind body and I was in a place where I could receive the information from
yeah,
people who
yeah,
weren't just kind of like throwing some information at me without any without any pathway or support or anything. So when I was able to receive the information, it was like another portal, right? It brought me into this whole other world of like understanding. So like I don't just quit my job and the stress is going to go. I don't just break up with this person and the stress is going to go. I don't just move country. Like this stress is being generated within me by my understanding of myself, my understanding of the world
yeah.
around me. So it's like it was just for me that was a big leap despite the amount of, like you said, money and time that I had spent on already understanding my psychological world. It brought me to a different place.
Yeah, you have to be ready for it, because I think that even if it's explained correctly, you have to be ready for it. And that makes sense because if you're in fight or flight in that sympathetic your nervous system is in that sympathetic state, you are thinking differently. It's that if you were getting chased by a tiger, you can't go and sit down and solve a crossword puzzle at the same time. Your brain has to work differently when you're in a survival mode. And what we underestimate is how daily stress and anxiety uh, can put you in that fight or flight mode, even though you might not think, well, I'm not being chased by a tiger. My life is comfortable. I have a nice house. I have a nice family. I have everything that I can provide for, or that, you feel comfortable. You can still be there if you're in that worried, stressed out state. And if you're in that state and somebody tries to explain, mind body condition to you, it's hard to get that in. Maybe if you hear it enough times. For me, I think it was just enough little pieces along the way that got me open to it when it made the most sense. And having that second massive flare up when my father passed away was, that really just, I couldn't deny it. Now, it still took a little bit for me to accept the idea that there wasn't anything that physically needed to heal, right? Like, okay, maybe I've got something and stress is making it worse, rather than like it truly is the stress that's creating it. Because when you're in pain, and I know that, like, I interact with people all the time when they message me, or I've had calls and video calls with people. They're like, but my pain is real, and it's so visceral, and they want to go into like the details of their symptoms, and then they want to hear that I had those symptoms, and I'm like, shit, mate, I had them all. I had, the whole list. I had everything, and they want to hear that it was exactly the same, so that they can be like, oh, okay. And then as soon as they hear something different, then they're like, well, mine's different. And be like, it doesn't matter in the end what it is. And it's hard to accept that too, because we are so, like you said, you want to know the mechanics, you want to know the structural side, you want to know the physical, where the nerves and the muscles are. And, we're just all used to thinking that way.
We really are. Yeah, we're used to thinking of the physical
Yep.
and not so much the emotional. And
Yeah.
I guess it's scary as well to face yourself and to face potential changes that need to happen. So the symptoms are serving as a barrier, or they're serving as a protector for
Yeah.
you to not have to face those things, like maybe like very hard decisions, or maybe very difficult memories, or maybe you're just like, just like so stressed and worried, just keeping everything afloat. You're like, I don't, what if I stop to think, then everything is going to fall apart.
Yeah. I was actually having this conversation with somebody recently because they were talking about their headaches. And I try not to vomit mind body stuff all over everybody, but like, you get passionate. I mean, you're passionate, right? This is how you're putting yourself out there in the world and helping people. So I try to like be selective because it can be annoying. But a friend was saying that he had a headache, and I was like, well, I was just trying to help, but also digging in a little bit. And I was like, well, why do you have a headache? And he goes, it's a lot of stress. I'm like, well, how does the stress create the headache? And he says, well, my neck muscles get all really tight, and that makes the headache. I said, well, why do your neck muscles get tight? He's like, well, I hold a lot of tension in my shoulders. I was like, why? And he's like, oh, I said, well, what's your stress going on? And he had some really challenging personal things going on, and he wanted to go mountain biking. And so we were going to go ride. And I'm like, yeah, the biking will help, but those stressors will still be there when you're done. I said, when you have these headaches, can you think about anything else? He's no, all I can think about is the pain. I said, well, not to be annoying, but your headache is distracting you from these things that you don't want to think about. You've got these tough personal things going on, some tough decisions, and the headache is distracting. And, so I left it at that, right? Because I didn't want to be, I wanted to, well, plus I wanted to go ride my bike, but, but it really does make that mechanic side, like you think about it, like it doesn't have to be pulleys and levers in your body. It can be that neural pathway behaviors and habits and what we reinforce. And once you open your mind to that, and then you think, okay, well, the your body can create any pain or any symptom on its own. It doesn't need a physical trigger. And it could also take a small physical trigger and amplify it, you know? And so you start to think about how these things all interplay, and it's really, really interesting. That's why I get so impressed by coaches like you and others that can really explain it well, because and I think it's cool too, because I'm rambling here a bit, but I think it's cool too because everybody's got a different way of explaining it based on their own experience, their background, um, and then also kind of the type of people that they work with the most. You said you work with sensitive women, right? So you have a way of honing on that. I love following Charlie Merrill's stuff because he's a cyclist, he's an athlete, he comes from a physical therapy side. Um, and so the way he explains it really resonates with me too. Jeannie had another way of very that purpose, and do you have meaning in your life, and like what distractions are you creating to not get at it? Some of that is really cool.
I love, love, love that. And I love Jeannie also. And so that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what kind of transformation did you experience in your life when you went on this mind body journey?
Yeah.
That's like non-symptom related transformation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from the outside, things might appear pretty similar. I didn't make a radical change. I didn't grow my hair out, whatever. um, but I definitely look at things, or I try, because we all slip up, right? I try to look at things in a much less catastrophic decision type thing. I think it's Alan Gordon has that phrase that he uses, lower the stakes. And so I try to look at things that way and try not to put such pressure on myself and put the weight of the world on my shoulders for each little thing. Like even with the way that I ride my mountain bike, I've accepted that this is a hobby. This is fun. If there's a day that I don't want to ride, why should I ride? And I also have told myself every ride is a good ride. Like, why wouldn't it be? I'm incredibly fortunate that I have the time and money and trails to ride my bike in the woods. Why should I ever be in a ride or finish a ride and not be happy with it? And, just going into it. So if there's a day that I get on and I start to ride and I don't feel fast, I don't feel capable, I just mellow out and don't beat myself up. And I've done like little things like I don't record my rides with all the data and the computers anymore, because what was I really doing with that? Like, so some of those things are different. Similar with work is when I made that job change, I went into the new job with, sorry, I had a call, it buzzed in. So, I made, when I made the job change, I like mellowed out and been like, this doesn't have to be the end all be all. I didn't make a final career decision here. And I'm kind of going, I've been at this new job a year and I'm doing fine with it. There's things I'm not happy about, but I try not to do such doomsday. And I, it's thought change and it's retraining yourself. So I slip up. I definitely have days where, and I feel it when those things happen. I feel it in energy. I do feel it in symptoms at times. Um, so, so those are some changes. I think it is inching me towards a greater like purpose or passion. And Jeannie and I, when we worked together, she definitely was like, I don't, you're not done, right? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. She planted. I say that she planted a lot of seeds. There's a little garden in my mind of ideas growing, and I don't know exactly what to do with it yet.
I love that. And I love those subtle changes that you're talking about because for me, I really, really relate to that a huge amount of pressure I was putting on myself. I had no idea that I just thought that was me. That was just how I functioned. I had no idea that was like a trait or a thing or anything you could change, let alone that it had so much to do with my debilitating health conditions.
Yeah,
And of course, it's something that I'm always like just say, untangling. I'm
yeah,
always, will forever be untangling this. And I see it in my clients so much. They're like, wow, I just took the pressure. I just changed. I finally gave in to that thought that I should be. Actually, one client told me that TMS is too many shoulds. I had
I like.
this client that said she was like, I finally just gave in. Like, so what if I'm in bed all day today? Like, so what if
Yeah,
I'm not like achieving like everyone, like my friends,
yeah,
with all these boxes ticked? Like, so what? I'm just gonna be in bed today. And she's like, oh, I just felt great. I slept well. I had
yeah,
energy the next day. It's like, it is a huge amount to do with all the pressure and the conditioning that we think we should be a certain way other than what we are. And that's why for me, the most surprising and enriching part of this journey, I was not breaking free from the symptoms. It was like starting to just really feel freer to be myself, even though that also brought up a lot of symptoms and terror to step out in the world, maybe in this way, but also in subtle ways. Like you're saying, someone from the outside might not notice any difference, maybe with the relationship with my brother or something, but it's so much more tender
yeah.
and deeper and authentic. And um, so for me, that's just such the most beautiful gift of going on this journey.
Yeah, I agree. Just yeah, it doesn't have to be a radical change, and it can be a change inside that only comes out, externally. But I think that like my wife would agree that I'm a lot easier to live with. I have two teenage sons. They're 17 and 19. Just had the first one move into college recently, and you can be really demanding as a parent, and especially if you're on edge or if you are hypercritical of yourself, you are going to turn that on to the people around you too. And so, me mellowing out at my own perspective, it maybe has helped me mellow out on just how I parent and be more accepting of things. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to how else it will develop. And also, making sure that I'm true to myself and stay on this path because we all have a personality that we're wired into, and it could be easy for me to drift back into that, that other kind of intensity and anxiety. But I would say the biggest gain that I've made is not being hyper alert to um, like little things in my body, not like oh, this doesn't feel right. I should go get it checked out, or what could it be? Or googling your symptom, um, and and then I get as I help people and they connect with me, it reinforces where I've been and reminds me of where I was because I'm sure you deal with it all the time with your clients when they're talking about where they are. It brings you back to where you were at your worst, and there are days where I just get overwhelmed with that. Like, oh my God, like not only was I that bad, but imagine if it just kept going. And for you, it went on a long time. For me, it was only the worst of it was about a year. And then I had another 6 months where it was, I was improving. Um, but I had a few years before that where it was bad too. But for you, it was decades. So
Yeah, I don't know if I would still be around, to be honest, if that was how it was gonna keep going. And when I think about it as well, how I was so bedridden and so the light in me was just out, and it was just such a waste. Like I have so much, like we all do, like we all have so much light to give, we all have so much energy to give and love to give.
Yeah.
Whether it's meditating in a cave for the rest of your life, or it's being out on your bike all day, whatever it is, you have so much to live for. And so yeah, I also find connecting with people in this way and with my clients very reaffirming. But something you said that I loved is that you were excited and that you look forward to how it's all going to unfold. I think some people can get stuck because maybe they get results and they get to somewhere they want to be, and then they feel like there's a setback kind of system. But for me, like, of course that happens to me too. But for me, I just genuinely, I'm just so excited and always looking forward to how this journey will continue to unfold. And I feel like once you can really, grasp the information and have one or two or three tools that really work for you, um, and some people to check in with, whether it's a coach or a community or whatever, you just can kind of just keep going. And there's so many treasures to be mined. And yeah, like the setbacks for me are have always been massive opportunities for growth and just another area that I'm now ready to look at that I just wasn't ready to look at in my life before.
Yep. I'm uh I'm over here co-regulating with my dog.
Oh, gorgeous.
He came over to check on me.
So yeah, thank you so much, Andrew, and your lovely little doggy there and your beautiful nature in Atlanta. Thanks for coming in and tuning in and for sharing your journey. And I know so many people will just get that reassurance, and there's was so many gems, pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate reaching out, and I love following your stuff. I love it when you and Anna talk. She's. I told her on the podcast I did with her that like, I got so much from all the stuff that she put out there, and it felt like a personal achievement to be able to talk to her. Um, so yeah, it's you guys are all very giving, and I know that you kind of need to do that to put your message out there to help pull the clients in that you work with, but it goes it goes beyond at times, and you help more people than you know. So um, appreciate it. Yeah, if people want to hear my story or see pictures of my bicycles or my dogs, I have an Instagram site. It's Andrew MB Cyclist, AndrewMBCyclist, and they can come and learn a little bit more. But again, I just do it to help people out, really.
I will leave your details in the description so people can get in, yeah, connect with you and just hear more of your story.
Sure.
And yeah, thank you for putting your work out there or your story, as it were.
Yeah.
And yeah, nice to hang out, and I will see you again.
Thanks, Eva. Take care.